And we are live. Hi everyone and welcome to the Mind Massage. We were just having some trouble with connection, um, and I'm introducing my co-host who is here, Dr. Tom Ackman, and he has been traveling, so there may be a couple of connection issues, but we are going live here, and today's topic is inspiration meets purpose, meets stepping into self, meets action. How do we step into tomorrow's version of ourselves? And what does that even mean? This is where inspiration meets purpose. Are we stepping into the next version of ourselves, or are we going back into yesterday's version? And yesterday's version was only good enough for yesterday. It can only keep up with yesterday's progress. So as Tom finds his internet connectivity, aren't all of us just trying to connect here on earth, connecting to our purpose, connecting to our inspiration, connecting to others around us, like-minded people, and really connecting to who we are at our core. So as Tom finds his internet connectivity, I'm going to do a meditation. And if you're listening on Facebook Live or you're listening to the replay, just feel free, if you feel called on to close your eyes, then do that. And we're just going to take a deep breath in, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, and exhale. And right now, just connecting to that deepest part of ourselves. What do you feel most strongly about at this point in time that really just gives you purpose? Is it something that you're doing in business? Is it something that you feel called to do in just doing good in the world? Perhaps fulfilling a need, fulfilling an organization's need, whatever it is. What do you feel most strongly about? Maybe you feel most strongly about being a good parent, or connecting just to yourself and giving yourself time, giving yourself what you need, and just nourishing yourself, which we talked about last week. Step into that right now and take a deep breath in and out. How does it feel to nourish yourself? How does it feel to be connected to your deepest space inside yourself, to be connected to your core? And whatever feeling you're getting right now, there's space inside and nothing around you matters right now. We are in a space of connecting to self. And just feel that connection. What does it feel like? Does it feel like hope? Does it feel like inspiration? Does it feel like purpose? Or does it feel like playtime where you get to explore? You get to explore yourself. You get to explore what you love and what you'd love to do, and your calling, whatever you feel your calling is here on earth. What does that feel like? Does it feel, do you have a sense of newness or confidence, or just being free spirited? Just breathe that in and exhale anything that isn't you, and breathe in and out, and just feel you. And now that you've created that feeling, stay within that feeling and start opening your eyes. And here we are, stepping into the next version of ourselves, stepping into the now, connecting to ourselves. And Tom, I don't know if you've connected to us yet here on the internet, but that's a good metaphor. Hello, good morning.
That was beautiful. Good morning indeed. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be connected. Thank you.
Thank you. We were speaking earlier about what does it mean to step into the new paradigm, to step into the next version of yourself. And in that sense, when we connected to self, we're carrying such a deep message. If we're truly connected, we have a feeling that we're here for a purpose. And carrying that deep message, there's a lot attached to that. I'd love to hear some thoughts from you.
One of the things we were talking about this morning was that deep message is often a surprise to ourselves, right? We've pointed to that over the past couple of weeks. And I don't know if in your intro you were talking about being a heretic of some sort, going against the tide, right? We were talking this morning about not being received by others. Mm-hmm. Folks on the leading edge and the pioneering edge are often seen as insane or not quite playing the game of the conventional ideologies, right? And we can even pull that back into ourselves and say there might even come a time where the thing that comes to us as the gut instinct next right thing for ourselves might even be such a surprise to us that our old ego wants to hold on to it, right?
Mm-hmm. And we may even have that conflict between the previous version of ourselves and this version of ourselves, or the next version of ourselves, feeling like, how could I have been that person? How could I have done that? I have that feeling, which is probably why I haven't kept any of my old childhood diaries or journals or anything like that, which I now regret. But you have a feeling that if I've grown that person, that was you. And it's kind of become a good feeling because you're able to step into who you are now and appreciate who you were that got you to who you are. But I want to pick up on that thread about carrying this message where we said it may be unpopular and others might not agree with you. And it is stepping into what you know is your calling, the next version of yourself. How do we carry a leading edge message that is unaccepted and unpopular? What would be the secret there, if there is any?
I wish we could wave a magic wand and actually make that decision, right? It's very confronting for most people. And most of our neurocognitive stability comes from having a sense of self, right? And having a personality and having all of the neural mechanisms and the brain and the body that go along with who we were, who we have been, who we've trained to be, right? And I think maybe to answer your question, the first order of business is if you have a sneaking suspicion that something's not quite going well, I think we all have that, right? There's always something that we can look to and say, what's on the other side? What's over there? And it really takes something to listen to somebody else who's made that jump. And I think that's the answer to the question. The first order of business is get willing enough in a very profound way. And a lot of us have to go through a dark night of the soul, right? We've all had what everybody can choose something and say, what's the dark night of your soul? What's the midlife crisis? Even if you're a young person listening, it's what's the hardest thing you've gone through, right? What's the darkest chapter of your life where we don't call that good news necessarily, but that's usually a wake-up call, right? That says what we've been doing and the way it's been going is not okay anymore, right? And then something crashes and it looks like it's an abrupt wake-up call. And in that sense of emptiness or darkness, I like to call it a midlife crisis for older adults. And we get to that point there is a little bit of willingness. And then that's a long answer to your question, to answer the question. Sorry, that's a long explanation to answer your real question, which is once you've got that, the how do you is listen to somebody else for real, right? You know, and get in touch with that. We all have it, a pilot light of willingness that says, I'm willing to give up everything. I'm willing to give up all of what I thought I knew. It's a very scary prospect, right? We all come from families. We have a certain profession. We have a certain number of possessions. We have a certain number of thought forms, habits, etc., skill sets. What if you really could give up everything, right? And so it's a practice, I think. And the first order of business comes from listening to somebody who's done it and taking inspiration from people like you who can point the way and say, you know, there will be something over there. You don't need to know everything about what it is today, but just getting in touch with that first little sense of personal willingness that lets our personal senses, lets us shed who we are for a moment.
And I know that you're speaking from experience. I mean, you've done that, which is something I so admire. But before we go any further, I want to ask listeners, viewers, wherever you're viewing from, whether it's Facebook Live or whether you're on here live, we have viewers here live, and we will have people listening to this replay. Just answer this question. What is your calling? Do you feel that connectivity to yourself, or connectedness, whatever we choose to call it, where we can say, this is my calling? And it may make me unpopular, and Tom, as you were saying, it's an uncomfortable feeling. So what is it that is your calling so deeply that you could be willing to give up everything you've previously known, or everything you previously stood at, that spot that you stood in, to step into the next version? And just take a minute, think about that. And Tom, I think that's what you did when you stepped into functional medicine, right? That was a leading edge step. And
I wish I could take credit for the kind of mental clarity that it would take to do that. I can't really take credit for it. I joke a lot that I got tricked into buying a yoga studio with a friend who the universe has its ways, you know, of that which we cannot do for ourselves will be done for us. Right. I had an old friend who used to say, you will be contacted. And that was his way of sort of shorthandedly saying, you can pretend to run and hide, but you will get poked in the ribs. You will be contacted. My father used to say, you'll get poked in the ribs up until it's time for God to hit you upside the head with a 2x4. And so, no, I can't claim mental clarity to the paradigm shift I had when I was contemplating leaving my practice. It was a stepwise.
well,
What came up for you about that when you said, what's the future? Do you have a vision?
The vision, well, I was going to answer, I don't know if this is related, but I stepped into my next version when I became an Akashic Records reader, because I realized that a lot of people will think, what on earth? But that's okay, because it just felt so me and so amazing. And the next version is just combining everything. We all have different facets, different angles. And here's another question I think that our viewers need to contemplate and answer if they want to. What are the what you describe as polar opposite parts of yourself? These facets that you'd want to bring together because they're all part of you, where you can actually step into the next version of yourself. you know, where you could be the whatever. I'm the Akashic Records reader, and I am a teacher. I'm a coach. I empower girls and women. So all those facets together, and there's a part of you that doesn't have mental clarity that thinks, how will this work? And will people accept me? Will people accept the whole of me? Or will I have to prove myself in that place where you feel you have to prove yourself? What is that? And can you let go of that? If anyone wants to comment, feel free to. Otherwise, just think about it. So that's okay.
That's a powerful operative for me. When you asked what the polar opposite was, the thing that came for me was I need to have the answer versus, and that feels today like a constriction. It just felt like the way things were 15 years ago. It's just what I did, find the answer. I think many practitioners can align with that. Everybody can align with that, right? We're educated inside paradigms that say, find the answer, get control. Then the other end of the spectrum is, okay, how can I let go of control? How can I let go? What if both ends of the spectrum are equally constricting, right? Living inside that kind of a question, how do I ... pursue either end of the spectrum or attain either end of the spectrum, are also, constricting is a good word.
What word was that?
Constricting.
Oh, yes.
And so I can keep watching myself be constricted, right? And it's easy for people to hear things like that and say, well, what's the point of letting go? It's not a letting go. It's actually a feeling very footed, knowing that the underlying commitment to the thing. You say Akashic Records, for example, that's a having attained something. And I know you well enough that your underlying commitment in Akashic Records reading, well, maybe you put this in your language, but I'll make something up that is kind of close to what I think, and you can tell me, right? But there's an underlying commitment, which is, I'd like to know more about the esoteric wisdom, the holistic wisdom, not just of human life, but all life, right? I'd like to know more. And right now, with your capacities, the wanting to know more looks like Akashic Records reading. 10 years from now, the universe may have brought you the dissolution of the idea that you need to read Akashic Records, right? But that underlying commitment will always be there. I want to know more. And that's the driving creative force foundation from which this tangible real world thing called Akashic Records reader can be something, right? Does that feel comfortable?
Well, yes, that feels comfortable. That feels exactly like it. And there's a very important point with that is that as we think 10 years from now, this may not be the case. You know, I may not feel like I want to do or I need to do this. It will be something else. And just that thought, I think for all of us, is kind of unsettling because we want to know. And that's where we stepped into the point this morning that can we give ourselves permission to be unsure, unsettled, and unprepared as we step into our tomorrow? And if you're watching this, can you give yourself that permission? Can you be unsure, unsettled, and unprepared? And just know that is almost as permanent a state as change is, because we're always in a state of uncertainty or unsureness. How am I going to step into this situation? How am I going to step into the world with my beliefs about, say, COVID? How am I going to step into a world that doesn't necessarily understand my beliefs about whatever it is? And do I have to make myself something else and be accepted? And the answer is no. So how do we do that? If it's a decision, it's a yes or no. How do we do that? How do we speak that vision? How do we carry our message? Even though we are unsure, we are unprepared, we are unsettled by people not necessarily accepting us. Um, and maybe it's just about stepping into that. And if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, what is that about? And you have something comes to you about how am I going to do that? Write it down or leave a message on Facebook Live or just tell us how do you step into that next version, even though you may not be accepted. You may be the square peg in the round hole. That's something we face since we're children. Yeah. And do we need validation? Tommy brought up such an important point about can we do it without needing the reward, without needing the validation or the approval? Thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I suppose there's a place, right? We spend the first half of our lives looking for that validation. We spend the first years of our lives looking for settled and prepared and accepted. And then we get to a place where almost everybody gets to a place where it hasn't worked, right? It doesn't mean life doesn't work, but choose something, right? Choose something. And we all get to a place where, hey, this thing that I'm doing doesn't work. And then the dismantling begins, right? And the dismantling is usually the habits that we had to learn in the first part of life, which were the constructive ones, right? Which allowed us to keep taking the steps, which allowed us to step workably into the terrains of our lives, whether that be families or the institutions or the professions, find a little bit of workability, right? And then almost everybody has a nagging sense, at least, that there's probably something a little bit more. There's something now, time to individuate, right? Time to be a little bit more me instead of a little bit more what I came from. Not that there's anything wrong with where I came from, right? My family's my family and my legacy is my legacy. Even my professional education, that's my, it is what it is. And is it my future? Right? The answer's never clear and it never goes the way we say, right? So what you were saying before about being surprised is if we really could get to a place where we said, okay, so if I really want to redefine myself and get a grip on this thing that's not working, whether it be a relationship or a career or a car or a cell phone, which, right? We have relationships with technology much the way we have relationships with people these days. And if I'm going to have that, then what am I willing to dismantle? I think it's huge. I love your language. Be unprepared, because in reality, we're not ever. We're prepared for what we think we're prepared for, but it doesn't go that way ever.
And even though it doesn't go that way, you're right. And even though we're heading to the end of this conversation, um, I'd love to hear in 30 seconds because we're in a mind, body, spirit conversation and we've been focusing on the mind, we've been focusing on the spirit and connecting. But in the body, your body is always in the next wanting to step into the next version of itself. And do we allow it to do that? Can we live with being maybe unsettled and giving the body what it needs right now instead of the previous version of itself?
It's an interesting shift. That's also a shift in paradigm. I heard a speaker yesterday talking about how most of the forward-leaning sciences are breaking away from the idea that there's a mechanistic answer, right? We've seen physics do that. We've seen the Astrophysicists do that, and astrologers, and people who practice real forward, eyes open sort of vision. And interestingly, the allopathic systems of modern, quote, modern medicine are very stuck in figuring it out by structure. And that's fine, but it's almost like the child growing, learning the rules of the family to learn the structure of society. And now we've gotten to a place ideologically in the healing arts, I think, where we know the structure, and it's not sufficient. It's sufficient to rebuild this thing into the Tom who was here yesterday. But if I'm on the leading edge, right, you work with a lot of spiritualists, you work with a lot of people who are thinking in very big ways about how it's not just an individual conversation, it's an ecosystem conversation. It's a collective, yeah. And so that's why we say, a lot of times it sounds like, okay, how am I going to let go of who I am so I can be the next best version of me? That's not a get more conversation. That's not a selfish conversation. That's actually a how do I get in touch with the real me who knows this thing that looks like an individual has nothing to do with me. This thing that looks like an individual has nothing to do with the real me, right? And the more I can let go of it, no matter how fun and workable it is, the more I have access to the kind of things that we're talking about, which is step into that sort of higher consciousness, that higher fabric of things.
Yeah. And of course, just very simplistically, I mean, when we're looking at this individual that is me, looking at it in terms of body, our cells are renewing themselves all the time. We cannot possibly be who we were even a second ago. When I put up my hand like this and I put it down, in that time, something has changed. Like I'm a totally different version of myself, which is a very interesting take. So again, for the viewers, bringing it back, that what is your calling? What are you willing to let go of that maybe you always held on to carry this message? And are you willing to be unsure, unsettled, and unprepared in doing it? And are you willing to step into the next version of yourself with just that little inkling of faith that somewhere inside you, you know that you are stepping into the right space, maybe not even knowing what it is. And with that, I think, I remember when I was in junior school, and I may have my facts totally wrong, but there was an astronomer, perhaps it was Nicholas Copernicus, I can't even remember, who believed that instead of what everyone else was thinking, everyone thought that the sun revolved around the earth, and this guy was one of those who rightly believed, as we see now, that the earth revolves around the sun. And of course, he was called a heretic and he was chastised and so on. And just that, him stepping into the next version of himself and standing there and saying, I'm willing to be unsure, unsettled, and unprepared, but I know my message and this is what I'm carrying. And maybe it's not your message may not be as as inflammatory as it felt maybe to the people he was bringing the message to, but are you willing to do that? And that's what this whole mind massage is all about, right, Tom?
Amen. Amen. That's a beautiful ending thought, I think.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. And viewers, I just challenge you to write in your journals, what is it? What message are you carrying? What are you willing to release or let go of? And how are you stepping into the next version of yourself without needing the validation? There's the challenge for this week. Have a wonderful week, everyone. And yes, take up the challenge. We'd love to hear your comments on Facebook, in the mind massage group. So after you listen, put down your comment. Thank you, Tom. And I'm so glad you found your connectivity.
Thank you for your cosmic intelligence and patience. All things, our job is to wait for the miracle, yeah?
Right.
Have a beautiful day.
Bye.